for part of the time, at least, Mr. Producer, wasn't Donald Trump giving a speech? So for part of the time, presumably when he's going from the White House, giving a speech, greeting people, going back to the White House, it's very conceivable his phone wasn't even turned on. I'm just saying, ladies and gentlemen, nobody's had an opportunity to respond to anything, to any of this. Nobody. It's all one-sided. It's all being leaked. It's all intended to persuade you through the corrupt media.
So that is Mark Levin, who spent several years on a daily basis bursting blood vessels in his brain over Hillary Clinton potentially hiding literally anything that she did as Secretary of State. Now his job, and he's very clear about the effect that media is going to have on this in that clip, saying that it is corrupt media trying to persuade you. He's in the middle of doing that, persuading the right wingers that a 7-hour, it's basically like the Kool-Aid man has burst through the White House call logs. That's not something you should worry about. Because okay, 7 hours sounds really bad, but he was doing a speech for part of it, probably had 2 or 3 extended bathroom breaks, a couple of brief micro seizures. I mean, that's really gonna cut it down to 5 hours out of the call logs. Is that really something you should be worried about? But it's not just the numbers that he's going to be defensive about. He's going to himself identify reasons we should be concerned about this in his effort to convince us that we in fact should not, as you'll see in this clip.
The records show former White House chief strategist Stephen K. Bannon, who said on his January 5 podcast that all hell is going to break loose tomorrow, spoke with Trump twice on January 6th. Okay, what does that have to do with anything? That could have been any time on January 6th. So you see how the game is played? And what if the president did use his private phone? I think he was known to use his private phone. We know Obama used his private phone. We know Hillary used her private phone. We know nothing ever happened to them, whether it was Benghazi, whether it was Hillary destroying emails, whether anything of the sort.
Yeah, but you cared about that. You made a massive deal about that. There were multiple congressional hearings about all of the stuff that you're now so whatever. Nobody actually cared about that stuff. And so he talked to Steve Bannon, and Steve Bannon predicted chaos, and chaos indeed happened. That could have happened at any time. That's our point. We'd like to know the time, but they're hiding it, buddy. Jordan, this is so amateurish. This effort to, we know if Biden went off comms for a minute and a half, they'd be freaking out. It's 7 hours. What would it take at this point to get them to be consistent?
Yeah, the comparisons to Obama and Hillary, and do you remember the outrage over the visitor logs? They were all up in arms during the Obama years that they weren't releasing the visitor logs to the White House, and that was proof that there was shady dealings happening. And obviously, everyone remembers the Hillary email scandal, and he says, "Well, nothing happened to them, but you tried. You wanted something to happen." So it's not just that, okay, because there was no consequences, there shouldn't be any here. It's that now I don't even care anymore. I don't even want the first step, which would be an investigation or hearings or anything about it. But it's not that. It's that it's their guy. And this type of hyper partisanship and the cynicism, what really gets to me is how him and others in his space, because they have wide audiences, have just brainwashed this country. And that's just what people believe. It's okay, yeah, I guess the call could have been at any time. And not taking a second to think oh no, they were probably talking about this while it happened. He probably was not shaking hands with people and being greeted back at the White House for 7 hours. Yeah. It's ludicrous. This is childlike reasoning.
It's very notable this week that the Supreme Court and the entire country is reeling from their decision to overturn Roe v. Wade in that Dobbs decision. There was a sentence in there somewhere. And it's very notable who is speaking out right now, and it's notable who is not speaking out right now. We know there was an alleged former friend of Ivanka Trump said that she helped her get an abortion in high school. Unverified, but interesting. But we also know ultimately there are a lot of Republican lawmakers who campaign on being so-called pro-life, anti-choice, who make it, one of their biggest platforms, and yet have absolutely in private either paid for, advocated for those in their lives getting abortions, including their mistresses. And that couldn't be clearer than your boy, Representative Scott DesJarlais. I don't care how to pronounce his name.
DesJarlais.
Scott DesJarlais. DesJarlais is a physician and has been very quiet over the past week since the Supreme Court eliminated a woman's right to privacy over her health care. As the Daily Beast recalls, DesJarlais is the Republican official whose ex-wife had 2 abortions, and he demanded his mistress to have an abortion as well. Yet he maintains he's 100% pro-life. Now, look, when it comes to between you and anyone that you engage in consensual sex with, that is fine. It is okay to choose to terminate a pregnancy. People do it all the time, especially disproportionately people who are already parents. So I have a lot of empathy and I understand that. However, it's when you talk out of both sides of your mouth, when you do one thing and say another, that's where we're gonna call BS on it. So let's remember DesJarlais and this story, this little parable of the hypocrite. In 2012, those rumors began about the affairs the congressman had with coworkers. Oh, fun, coworkers, great. So it's a Me Too case, eh? And patients that were all well documented in his divorce. Okay, sorry. This is when Franny reads things for the first time. So he cheated on his wife with patients. He's a physician.
It's a HIPAA. Don't HIPAA him. This is HIPAA.
This is HIPAA. Oh God.
HIPAA.
Masks are HIPAA, and this is no, it's true. Hey, look. He ultimately fell under an ethics investigation after pressuring a patient to go to Georgia to abort the pregnancy he had caused. Okay, this guy is a massive POS. Came out that DesJarlais had urged his pregnant mistress to get an abortion, a stunning revelation that was caught on tape, and that his ex-wife had 2 abortions herself. Okay, so we don't have the tape, but there is transcript. And so I'm just gonna read some of the back and forth. Here's from that tape between him and his mistress. You told me you would have time to go with me and everything, the woman complains. You assume this is, hey, come with me to terminate your baby. I said if I could, I would, didn't I? And I will try. DesJarlais says, if I can find the time, you're saying you still will? Yeah, the woman answers. Well, we've got to do something soon, and you've even got to admit that because the clock is ticking, right? He says at another point, the clock is ticking. They are clearly talking about a pregnancy here, and Brett, he's not even really offering to support her through this decision.
He's horrible. He's a horrible, horrible person. And this is one thing I just really need to get through. As someone who went to Catholic school, went to a Christian preschool, and underwent the most painful and sacrifices of all in the name of religion, a bris. Like, you can still feel morally superior to people in very Christian ways for eternity, and be morally superior to other people for eternity without ruining their lives completely. You don't need to win the abortion legal battle in order to declare you're better than all the sinners who went out there and knocked people up and were like, can we please not have an abortion? That's one thing. Or can we please have an abortion? But this is even worse. And what's worse is we know that this stuff has happened throughout the history of the church itself. There's a story right now about a priest who just jerked off in front of a Starbucks and got arrested. Like, all these people who claim to be holier than thou and part of this religious right movement are themselves wildly hypocritical. And it's not a surprise. We knew this would happen.
We just saw a young woman out her pastor in front of the congregation for having raped her as a kid, and continually, like over years, traumatized her. Like but it doesn't actually matter because they're winning. So W is by their names, not by ours.